Welcome to the June 8th, 2021 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. The Planning Commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the podium when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to a silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like the Planning Commission Secretary, Kathy Sarnicki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Manala Hawley.
Here.
Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Roush.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here. Quorum present. The next item is expansion of the Planning Commission bylaws to allow Zoom participation in this meeting from residents. Do we have a motion to expand our bylaws for that? Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, can I,
Yeah, go ahead.
just for the education of all the Planning Commission, we had you and I and Julia had a very brief discussion before the meeting that we agreed that it probably should have said expansion instead of suspension.
Right.
We're getting some inquisitive looks because it says suspension and you keep saying expansion.
Yes.
So it was Ms. Dufresne's suggestion that we probably in the future this should say expansion of Planning Commission bylaws because they're really expanding some of the ways that we're taking in public input. We're not suspending it.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying it to the public. Appreciate it.
And Mr. Krent, if I could just piggyback on
go
those
ahead.
comments. So really the first therefore paragraph in the resolution doesn't need to even be part of the resolution because there isn't anyone participating remotely. That's only there if someone were to elect to participate remotely. So yeah, last meeting, I apologize, I was unavoidably late and we could have had this conversation at the last meeting and we would have had it resolved before this one. So it's up to Planning Commission, like Mr. Salvanat said, we do need to expand the opportunity to have public comment through the Zoom platform because that's not allowed in the platform, but we're not taking anything away. We're not suspending any rules. We're expanding the opportunity for public comment. So,
Thanks for that input. Do we have a resolution to expand our, Mr. Rahman, and a second? Mr. Roush. Vote, please, Ms. Sarnicki.
Mr. Chair, would you be so kind to tell me who moved?
It was Sadak Rahman.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Hawley.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? I move. Mr. Faison. And I'll give it to, oh God.
Parakis.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Hawley.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from our May 25th meeting of 2021. Motion to approve the minutes of that meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Lambert, and a second from Mr. Tagle. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Hawley.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krantz?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Do we have any comments from the public in any form?
There were no emails or voicemails submitted.
Okay, and I see no one in the audience, so that item is complete. Next item is preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2021-0005, proposed Warrior Baseball Indoor Hitting Facility, south side of Equity Drive, east of Coolidge, 1525 Equity, Section 32, currently zoned IB, Integrated Industrial and Business Zoning District, controlled by consent judgment. Great. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. Thank you and good evening. As the chairman alluded, proposed site plan for an addition to the Warrior Park, which is a baseball facility that's located on Equity Drive. This project was approved approximately 10 years ago via consent judgment. So tonight, the Planning Commission is charged with making a recommendation on the submitted site plan for the council consideration. Please note that any amendment to the consent judgment and any preliminary site plan approval ultimately lies with the City Council. The proposed improvements to the existing park include the construction of a 2-story addition of a new indoor hitting facility. It's located adjacent to Equity Drive, and I'm highlighting it here. It's number 1 on the list. The second improvement is relocate the batting cages to the southeast corner of the site. So again, in this location, the southeast corner of the site, adjacent to the airport. The third is to relocate the bullpen along the first baseline. The fourth is to add parking lot lighting, and the fifth is to add additional hardscape and landscaping to the site. The primary change to the site is the practice facility. That addition or building will be located on the existing grass/practice area of the site. It does not require any changes to the configuration of the site access, circulation, or any changes to the parking lot. We did note in our report, we noted that there were 2 items missing with regards to bulk standards. That includes the elevations to confirm the height, as well as lot coverage. Subsequent to our review going out, the applicant did provide elevations that do confirm the height is compliant, as well as they did provide the lot coverage calculation to also confirm that it's compliant. So the site does meet all the required standards set forth in section 415. The practice facility floor plan is just to outline what's going to happen within the practice facility. This is the first floor plan. The large area in kind of a greenish yellow color is going to be the practice facility. You can see there's 2 batting cages there, as well as a long 60-foot approximate length for pitching improvements. There's going to be some minor parent lounge and toilet room electrical, but the primary use of the first floor is that indoor recreational practice space. The second floor, most of it is actually second floor mezzanine space to allow for the height for the baseball facility. In addition, there's going to be a small office and some bathrooms. In addition, there's going to be an overlook area and a rooftop deck. I'll show that on the elevations, but that's going to be overlooking the baseball field. So parents can also sit on the rooftop deck overlooking the baseball field itself. I do want to note that in our review and in your plans, you saw a future improvement area kind of in the southwest corner of the site. In conversation with the applicant, they note this is just in the planning stages. They're not sure if they're going to committed to go forward with this. So that item is not to be considered as part of the site plan approval. We're only considering the items that I mentioned previous as part of this approval. One of the issues that comes up often with this use is parking and how that's going to be accommodated. There are 41 parking spaces on site. The applicant has had a long-standing agreement with Global Collision, which is just to the west of the facility, to share additional parking on an as-needed basis. The applicant did provide us with a letter from Global Collision saying that they support that agreement moving forward, and that agreement will be reviewed by the legal department to determine if it's sufficient, and they will make a recommendation with regards to any improvements to that agreement that need to be made moving forward. We do note that the applicant has submitted a concept landscape plan. However, it was not very detailed, and a detailed landscape plan would need to be submitted if this project does move forward. And lastly, we had a lengthy conversation with the applicant with regards to lighting. One of the issues that came up obviously was, are they planning on lighting the baseball fields moving forward, and what impact that would have both on any adjacent properties as well as the airport. The applicant at that time had not made any commitment with regards to lighting of the fields, and there's no indication of lighting on the site other than the parking lot itself. And so we were asking for confirmation from the applicant if they're going to light the fields, and if so, they do need to submit a detailed photometric plan and lighting fixture details. I should also say that they are adding two parking lot lights, two lights to the parking lot, and so they also should submit a photometric plan and light fixtures for those two additional lights. The applicant has submitted a detailed rendering package for the Planning Commission's consideration. The primary materials that they are proposing include split-face CMU, glass, and a metal roof. The primary colors are a variety of gray. This is this rendering shows the front main primary entrance to the facility that would be accessed from the parking lot. This rendering shows what the facility would look at if you're actually on the field itself. And you can see those three people kind of mingling on top would be the rooftop, or the rooftop deck to overlook the field. This rendering is the rendering of what you would see as you drive down Equity Drive. Oops, excuse me. So lastly, we do note the applicant is making a very significant investment in the site, which we do support. However, we did note there are a few outstanding items that the Planning Commission can either make conditions of approval as part of the recommendation or require the applicant to resubmit. These outstanding items include the City Department's legal review of the parking agreement, provide a detailed landscape plan, and lastly, confirm site lighting, including fields, and submit a detailed lighting photometric plan and fixture details. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this item? Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
Mr. Carlisle, under your report, it indicates as to one of the conditions that number of spaces required, not applicable. But with a shared parking agreement, you're satisfied. What happens if that shared parking agreement terminates for some reason?
And that's the question I have for that's why I'm asking the city legal department to review that agreement to see how long it should be and what the binding terms are. And I believe Mr. Dufresne's looked at it, but has some questions on it.
Right. I mean, I think at this point, because, Mr. Hudson, because we have to amend the consent judgment, my recommendation is that we figure out a way to memorialize that in the consent judgment, which gets recorded. I guess I did, since Mr. Hudson brought this up, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Carlisle a question?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Carlisle, on that point, so how many spots are they short? If any, I mean, what is the?
There's no set number in the zoning ordinance because it's a baseball field, and so I think we are pretty confident that the 41 spaces are sufficient for most times of use of the field. Where you may have issues is if you have a tournament or if the use of the practice facility is used concurrently with the field itself. We do think with the global collision is mostly going to be used the parking is supposed to be used on the weekends and after hours. That the global collision site should be sufficient for overflow parking, but that should be memorialized in an agreement.
Okay, and another question, and I should probably know the answer, but I don't. The collision shop is part of, because there's a number of parcels that are part of that consent judgment. I'm assuming that the collision shop is, yeah. So I think that's the best way to handle that, Mr. Hudson, is to memorialize it in the consent judgment.
It's up to the legal department.
Ms. Parakas.
I mean, not to belabor the point, but I actually drove by there this morning at 11 a.m. and there was a baseball game going on. There were adult men, so presumably they drove themselves. There were maybe 2 people in the stands, but the parking lot, I would say, was close to 80%. I mean, I hate to give a percent, but there were about 4 parking spots available. So imagine having it be a youth game where mom shows up first, dad comes in another car, grandparents show up. It's strange to me that this was allowed to be built and there's no number of parking spots that were required, because I do see that would be an issue. This was a weekday at 11. I didn't happen to notice the overflow parking lot, but I can see that it would be a problem. I'm surprised we're not having any requirement.
My understanding is the current parking agreement is a current already agreement between the two parties. So there's already a shared parking agreement. So we're going to, as part of the consent judgment, we're going to look at that and to make sure, confirm with the legal department's review that it's sufficient for those needs.
Okay, so at some point, they do have to come up with an estimated number of parking spots that they need to satisfy and make sure that the collision.
That's something we would certainly want to memorialize in the actual, we want to know the actual number that they're actually, the number of shared spaces they're getting from the collision to make sure, to ensure that it's compliant to meet their needs for the parking.
Okay.
Yeah. We just don't have that number at this point yet until we actually have the legal agreements worked out with the legal department.
Okay.
Any other comments or thoughts for our staff? This is just between staff and planning commission at this point. We'll have another time for yours.
Chairman Grant.
Representing the owner.
Yep, you'll be there in a minute. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Ms. Malala Holly first.
Mr. Carlisle, this is purely for my information alone to help make the decision here. The second floor of the building that is going to be built, of course, there are no plans yet, but is it something that we usually do recommend to the city council without having anything concrete on paper regarding what second floor of the building will look like?
Sorry, the second floor of the baseball facility?
Of the baseball facility, yeah, the building that is being proposed to be built, and the second floor does not have a clear-cut plan. The first floor definitely does, and your maps, the maps that you showed indicated what is going to be built in the first floor. I just want to know
Yeah,
that.
so, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't very clear. The second floor does have a detailed elevation, or floor plan with it. This is the second floor.
Okay,
What's 12, where you may say it's not clear, it's open, because it's, the batting cages are below it, so they need a height clearance.
I see, okay.
And so the second floor really is only being half used. It includes the overlook area and the batting, and then the rooftop deck. But for the most part, the second floor is not very functional because most of it's being used as open space for the floor below.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
it actually they confirm what they're using the second floor for.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Sorry I wasn't very clear on my presentation.
Well, likewise.
Mr. Rahman.
Just want to double check. I think this is a runway, right? Right next to the facility, there is a runway there, right? So my question is there, from a lighting standpoint or any other, things that we are going to add, is there any restriction from the standards that runway has to have?
They would have to run the lighting plan through the FAA to make sure that they're compliant with the FAA standards for lighting. And that I think that would apply both to lighting of the parking lot as well as especially of any future lighting of the baseball field
Right, that's
itself.
what I'm thinking.
So FAA would need to sign off on those.
And then the other question I have is, if I can continue, I know that someone probably mentioned about having a tournament. So can we somehow confirm that there will be no tournament here, or some kind of like a, I think so that we make sure that we are not getting enough people. Because currently the parking is fine, as far as my understanding, because it's just a practice ground. But if we have tournament, then there will be more people and there will be an overflow of cars. So how can we make sure that there is no such event?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
this facility's been in operation for approximately a decade.
Yeah.
There's no parking complaints that I'm aware of. I believe they've had an agreement with the auto body shop next door over that entire time. They do have tournaments. They've been having tournaments for 10 years, and there's no complaints that I'm aware of. We'll nail down the parking agreement, but I think that the applicant has every intention to have tournaments. And again, it has not been an issue for a decade.
Right, yeah. If you look at their baseball schedule, you'll see all the games they're playing, which I did. There's a lot of games, and every year they have a lot of games. So it's not a new course. This is not new. This is.
No, I know, but then, but if this is a huge investment here. I see that it's my feeling is there will be more people coming to this facility, so.
Well,
and I don't see any effort to increase the parking spot, and we are kind of sharing a parking spot with another facility, so.
I think the applicant will clarify any questions you have, considering the longevity of the use of this field, so.
Okay.
Any other thoughts for staff before I bring up the applicant? Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
I just want out of curiosity, Mr. Carlisle, do you know what the limitations are for lighting the FAA in terms of neighboring it, how far away from an airport they go, or do we know?
No, there's a lot of factors. Flight paths, one of them, location, proximity to the property lines. There's a lot of factors that determine with the FAA, how they determine lighting.
No, I imagine they're more restrictive.
My question is, how do we
anything
know
the
that the FAA actually has a requirement for lighting adjacent to the property? Is that something you actually know?
Every airport, every municipality I work with that has an airport, we always make sure they run lighting through the FAA.
Oh, okay, so you know there is some regulation. Okay.
Any other thoughts? Seeing none, applicant, please step up and give us a presentation. Introduce yourself and where
My
you're
name
from.
is Paul Stahoviak from Integrated Design Solutions. We were the architects that worked originally with Brother Rice High School when the property was bought, developed it over phases. As a background, what's transpired this year, one of their alumni, DJ LeMahieu, purchased Warrior Park from Brother Rice and set up a long-term $1 a year lease agreement so they can continue to play all of their baseball games on that field. His intent here was to provide some greater opportunities in Southeast Michigan for youth baseball development. It was really developed initially as Brother Rice's home baseball field and some limited other things during the year, but DJ has made a commitment over time to develop the indoor hitting facility. Right now they have just outdoor batting cages that we need to relocate because they currently exist where the proposed enclosed indoor hitting facility was going to go. It allows them then to run year-round into the winter to provide hitting training primarily for youth. DJ lives in the state. He'll probably take batting practice in the off-season there himself. As background as well, dating back, the owner of Lincoln of Troy Global Collision is a Brother Rice alumni, and that's where that relationship started as a commitment back to the school. So I think he'll be open whatever the city attorney would like to memorialize in the agreement. They're there to stay. They're committed to support Brother Rice. They're committed to supporting DJ's vision for youth baseball in the area. There are very strict guidelines relative to lighting of fields adjacent to an airport. We've already had communications and have submitted and would require a variance. Typically what they have is a glide slope from the center line of the runway that the height of an allowable permanent obstruction gets a little taller the further away from the runway you get. The light poles that would be located down the first base line in right center field to appropriately light a field are not in compliance. As we talked with the FAA, and there was no guarantee, but they've been told for airports of this type that they have relatively light traffic, a beacon on top of the light pole to warn any pilots coming and going that there's an obstruction. Would be an official notification to anybody using that airport that there are obstructions with a red beacon, if they allow us. If they don't, we'll pass. I think if the FAA does allow us, then the question would come back to, is it okay with the city? Parking lot lighting, you go down Equity Drive, we're again within proximity of the runway. You need to minimize the uplight component that might blind. The Walmart and whatever parking lot are all in kind of that same zone. So we don't see any problem having capability to light that parking, provide safe nighttime lighting. They're not, I don't know that they've defined specifically their business hours, but they are going to operate in the winter, and they'll probably be open for training until at least 8 o'clock. If it's youth, you know, they're not going to go till midnight, but in December it's dark at 5, and you need to get from the parking lot to the hitting facility, and that is planned. That southwest corner, again, whether we come back in the future or whether we comment on it as a part of this consent agreement, DJ's intention there is to turf that corner. The current field has a turf infield, a natural grass outfield, and largely because that's what Brother Rice could afford when they developed it. I think his intention is to ultimately turf the outfield of the main ball field as well, and then turf that southwest corner Little League field. So again, it's always playable. He's just recently completed a gift to Memorial Park in Royal Oak to turf that field for youth baseball. So I think he's touching a few things in the community as a part of the blessings that he's received from having that kind of support as a youth growing up in baseball.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Roush?
So how high were the proposed light poles for the field that were in question?
A typical baseball field is 65 feet.
65 feet high lights?
Yes.
Okay.
For the baseball field. And in that corner of the site, closest to the runway, about 20 feet is allowed. So again, it would require a variance. We're in that process. It takes a while. It was not DJ's intention to, and his game plan for the site is to, over the next couple of years, I mean, for this year, we have a $1.7 million hard cap on what he's going to invest this year to do. There may be some tweaks to the building plan itself, given the cost of materials, COVID-related things. We're not sure we're going to be able to afford it exactly as done, but we'll come back with Brent if we need to live within that. I think second priority would probably be the turf outfield. The other minor, is the batting cages. The bullpen is also where the new hitting facility is going to be. That's why that was being relocated from where it was. And then it would probably be that southwest corner turfed infield over the next 3 to 5 years. And again, we're prepared if we want to just deal with the hitting facility now and come back, we can. Whatever we want to address in the consent agreement, again, DJ's commitment is an ongoing investment in the property to help youth baseball.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
You originally designed the facility that's there now?
Yes.
Okay, well, my compliments. It's a beautiful facility.
Thank you.
I know at least one high school in Troy that would love to have that as their baseball facility. The one question I had is, I know there's been a couple of questions raised about parking and, handling a large crowd of people parking there. Are you aware of when there's like Birmingham Brother Rice or any other team uses it for a tournament? Do you have assisted parking, having people out there to help people park or not?
They would typically have, for a Brother Rice tournament, their staff would come as if, it were an event that they can hold at their high school site. They have a lacrosse field, they have a football field, and they have parent volunteers that run parking. They notify the teams that there's limited parking on the property direct, but the overflow is there. And I mean, if you had driven by, I've driven by on numerous occasions, that parking lot generally is for some overflow of cars, which haven't sold yet, or because there's the collision shop, but it also serves one of the Lincoln dealership as a storage facility off-site. Right now, it's hard to get cars, so I don't think that you'd find much there today. But when things are back to normal, but I would say the most I've ever seen as I've been there, used by the bump shop, was 20% of that parking lot at tops 70, 75, 80% of it is typically wide open.
Any other thoughts? So go ahead, Mr. Faison.
So I know we're talking about the specific project today, but you mentioned the potential for the Little League field in one of the corners. And I was just curious, as you talk to DJ LeMahieu or you talk about the project, if you were to do this, what you're proposing today, and that, is that the extent of what you would do on the site, or is there potential?
Everything that was shown is his full vision.
Okay.
Within that corner where the Little League baseball field was, there was a dashed line that represented a potential strength training, conditioning, cardiac workout room.
Okay.
But other than that, the site is maxed.
Yeah, that was my question.
And yeah, for Brother Rice's use, going way back in the master plan, that part of them acquiring that field with donors, Brother Rice just rented baseball fields from wherever they could. With a freshman, a JV, and a varsity team, practices were scattered kind of all over the place. So the intent there was the full field would be the varsity practice. Well, they'd take infield in the southwest corner, they'd hit the batting cages down the third base line, and they'd do full field, outfield, hitting, whatever on the major field. And their intent was, we're going to allow the kids to, all three teams, freshman, JV, and varsity, will have practice after school from 3:30 until 5:30, and they'll just rotate kind of through those three stations. They didn't have the money to finish the infield until DJ came along and bought the field and is offering to do that. So when it's in high school baseball season, Brother Rice will use that as their infield training for their teams as they rotate. There is a group that will be working with DJ that will, I'm not sure exactly how many youth training sites there are, but there are a considerable number here in Southeast Michigan, whether they're in an old shopping mall or whatever type of thing. DJ was looking to give a better situation, more appropriate to higher end training, and he has some coaches that will be taking on applicants from youth baseball teams to individuals to sign up for training here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts? I just have one comment. I'm sure you probably watched Channel 4 this evening and saw your field in its full glory. Wow, was I impressed with the seating. That's regular stadium seating. That's not benches.
Well, the first iteration of that field was aluminum bleachers. We built the field, aluminum bleachers behind, and 2 dugouts with some storage because it's remote from Brother Rice High School. They've put a few players into the majors over their history, and some families that donated and brought about. I mean, when we first came in, porta-johns were the toilet of choice at the field. That facility gave them the opportunity to add concessions, toilet rooms, locker room, storage, and stadium seating.
Yeah, wow, it's impressive. It's a beautiful field. Was there any divine intervention of having that story on television tonight along with this meeting? I mean, just asking.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, you don't have a connection up there, okay.
Well, and I'd tell you, if I'd say it was more Brother Rice politically if it was on ABC, because Brad Galley's a Brother Rice alum also. So you'll get a number of Brother Rice stories that Brad will go out and seek out. I'm not sure exactly how they got this one.
Yeah, great. Any other thoughts before we move on with a resolution?
Just to remind, so a couple things. One, Paul didn't mention it, I don't believe, but for those who aren't baseball fans, DJ LeMahieu is one of the better hitters in baseball. He plays for the New York Yankees. And just a reminder that the role of the Planning Commission for this item, because it's a consent judgment, is to make a recommendation. It goes before City Council.
Right. So do we have a recommendation resolution here? Anybody would like to look at the one that's printed and This has been adjusted for the things that they have already submitted, correct?
Was not,
Was not?
was not.
Okay. So who wants to, Mr. Lambert, thank you.
I'll give it a shot and make sure that Assistant City Attorney makes sure I have the correct wording on one of these clauses, but resolve that the Planning Commission recommends that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Warrior Baseball indoor hitting facility located on the south side of Equity Drive, east of Coolidge, 1525 Equity, Section 32, currently zoned IB Integrated Industrial and Business District and controlled by a consent judgment, be granted subject to the following. 1, review and approval of shared parking agreement by city attorney as memorialized in the consent agreement.
That's fine.
Second, providing a detailed landscape plan. And third, confirming site lighting and submit detailed lighting, photometric plan, and fixture details.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Mr. Faison, I'll give it. You got that? Mr. Faison, second. Okay. Roll call, please, Ms. Sardinki.
Isn't there discussion, or?
Oh,
did
we
miss
could.
that?
Yes, we could. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Parakis. Yes.
I guess this question is for Julie, Ms. Dufresne. In terms of that parking, is there a way to make sure that if that collision shop next door gets sold to a non-Brother Rice alumni or whatever, that would carry forward? It would be bound, binding on the next owners of that building. That's just a concern still, because I do think that they're really relying on that parking.
Right, I mean, that's why my suggestion is we memorialize it in the consent judgment, because that gets recorded, and if you want to make that a condition that it's in perpetuity, I mean, you could make that as a condition.
I mean, if we don't make that a condition, then what are the implications if a new owner comes in and terminates the agreement?
Well, the consent judgment would have to be revised. And again, it would go through this process again. If it's just, I guess my concern is that right now it's just a letter of agreement, and that can be rescinded at any time.
Right.
So the consent judgment, would have to be modified, and the city council would have to sign off on it. So really, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If you want to put a perpetuity clause in there, I don't know if the owner will agree to that. That might make it more complicated, because now you've got to get the collision shop to sign off on it as well. So if you're satisfied that the consent judgment would have to be reviewed and modified again. I mean, there's 2 different ways for that protection.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Or be replaced? In other words, if it wasn't in perpetuity, a replacement be provided?
Oh, I'm sorry, replacement?
A replacement be provided?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. So, or other alternative parking found somewhere else, correct?
So with that, do we need to amend this resolution, or is it good enough?
I think we've all got the same goal here, is to make sure the parking works.
Yes, correct.
I think that I'm not an attorney, but it seems like that was, the recommendation was to have the city attorney work on a document that's going to protect the interests of the city of Troy.
Do we need to add that to our resolution?
That's up.
I mean, it would be wise to add that to our resolution?
Depends on how restrictive you want the resolution to be, and how much direction you want to give me and city council. I mean,
Again, it's city council that really holds the weight.
Right.
Mr. Faison, you?
So I'm confused. I thought that was what we were talking about in this resolution. Review and approval of the shared parking agreement. You said making that part of the consent agreement, right? Any changes to that consent agreement come back to this body.
Right, but Ms. Parakis is adding the additional layer of protection to make that specifically related to a perpetuity clause, which that makes it much more restrictive. So I just, whatever direction this board wants.
Just wanted to follow up on that.
Sure.
So I don't understand what the perpetuity clause adds. If it can't be changed without this body's
It
consent.
just adds
the city council.
another layer of protection. It just makes it it's just another layer. It's the best way to describe it. It's just another layer of protection.
Go ahead, Mr. Savanagh.
I think Mr. Rauch raises a really good point. If for some reason the auto body shop is sold and the new owner doesn't want to participate in any shared parking, then the burden's going to be on the applicant to come up with another scenario. Maybe the property to the east would be available for shared parking. Maybe the Walmart would be available, et cetera. There's other alternatives here. So I think Ms. Prokas's concern is very valid, but I think that we can come up with some language with this, obviously the city attorney, that's going to provide protection and some flexibility.
Do we need that? My question is, do we need to put all that language into our resolution?
It's your resolution, Mr. Chairman?
Okay. What do you think, Mr. Go ahead, Mr. Lawyer. Mr. Hudson.
Well, it seems to me using the word in perpetuity with this agreement really is a problem, because if there are alternate spots to Nordstrom's a good example. During the Christmas season, they've got extra lots with buses going back and forth. But I think to use the word in perpetuity for this particular agreement is too restrictive. It should be flexible enough that if a substitute parking solution can be found, that should take care of it.
Okay. Again, my question is, do we have to put that in the resolution? Or was it going to be handled before it goes to council with some kind of language? Or
It's going to be, it'll be memorialized in the consent judgment that goes to city council. So city council is going to review the consent. You don't have it here because we haven't worked it out. We don't know what the parameters are of the consent judgment. When it gets to city council, the consent judgment will be in writing, and that's what the owner of Warrior Park will sign, and that's what city council will sign. So it will be done at the time of city council.
Okay. And then, since you've already heard from the commission our concerns, you know when you write that up what to put in there that reflects our thoughts. Okay. Anything else before we have a vote? Roll call, please.
Ms. Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
No.
Mr. Rahman,
No.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
was that affirmative, Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Tagle?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda.
Mr. Sachowiak,
Pardon?
I don't have the attorney that you all are working with, so if someone could get me that name. Nenowith, okay, because he wasn't on any of the emails that I have. I don't have his name in any of the emails, so. Okay, thank you.
That's a good lawyer.
Good to know. Okay, now we're going to go on to item 7, master plan update.
I'll start.
Okay.
We went live with the survey last week, and Mr. Lambert was very, very quick to inform me that the link didn't work very well for a few hours, but we fixed it. Ben can go into, I think Ben's got up-to-date numbers in terms of a response rate, but we fixed it very quickly. I think we got yourself and 2 residents emailed me that evening, and you probably heard me scream from my house because I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have to do all these different things, but it was very quickly fixed. So thanks to everyone's patience on that, but I'll hand it over to Ben now.
So thank you. So I just checked today, and so far we've got over 900 responses. About a week in, a little less than a week. We still have another approximately 10 days to go. We are doing what I call rolling kind of notification. So social media is started, emails are starting to go out. We don't want to do it all at one point, and then so we're going to do rolling so that we think those different outlets will hit people different times and a number of times. So that includes, like I said, emails, social media blasts. We've got a link on our website. We've got a scrolling kind of banner on the website that shows a link directly to the survey itself. We've got hard copies at the community center with a ballot box for people to put it actually in the box so they can do it manually. We've got flyers that have been posted throughout the community with the QR code, so people can go directly from that. And so I don't think we're going to have any problem meeting our goal of what we achieved, but please push this out to as many people as you can. And again, we're going to keep rolling these announcements out between now and the end of the close of the date.
Also, we recognize that some people don't have smartphones or don't have emails. And we put a ballot box with hard copy surveys in the community center near the front desk. We've had people who have been very happily found out that they can participate by submitting a hard copy and putting it in the ballot box. We're checking that daily to make sure that there's still ballot or surveys to fill out. So far, the response has been very positive, and like Ben said, we want to keep the momentum going to maximize the number of returns we get.
Any thoughts from the commission to our staff about this item? All I have to say is I got notified through Glenn Laban. So it's coming from different angles.
Yeah, and that's the goal. We've got 3 city staff alone that are charged with doing it. They're different representative. I think actually 5. They're different representative groups. So it's hitting the recreation community, the business community, the homeowner association community, people on social media, people that have signed up through the police emails. So we're trying to hit every single person possibly with the announcement. So again, it's going to be rolling and it's going to be ongoing. There'll be pushes out daily on this.
Very nice.
And this is, I should say that we're going to use this strategy for anything we do with regards to master plan notification. So it's not just a survey, but we've got a list of people that will keep sending this through.
Very nice. Mr. Faison.
Just a question for Mr. Salvador. So, Brent, you said the responses are positive. Do you mean it's positive the number of responses you're getting or the content and the feedback in the responses?
I was referring specifically to residents who were informed that there were hard copy surveys so that they weren't left out of the process. They could go to the community center and still participate even though they weren't electronically savvy.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts before we move on? Seeing none. Next item is public comments for items on the current agenda. I see no one in the audience here. Do we have any other either Zoom or emails or voice messages for items that are on tonight's agenda?
Brent, is someone monitoring? Is someone monitoring? You are? There's no one there? Okay. Yes, okay.
Okay, so we'll go on to that. Hearing that we have none, we'll go on to the next item, which is Planning Commission comment. Let's just start over with Julie Dufresne. Anything?
Nothing from me, thank you, Mr. Grant.
Okay, keep rolling.
Thank you. Nope.
Mr. Faison.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Hudson.
Nothing, thank you.
Lambert.
I'm good.
I do want to just say one thing. I just wanted to let you know that, I really liked the project. I am a little bit perplexed about the parking issue still, only because I feel like if it were anywhere else, it's odd to me that we would build something where hundreds of people can come and we don't even have an idea. Normally you tell us, okay, they have to have 91 parking spots and they're deficient or they're not. We don't even have a number, and then we're relying on this neighboring parking lot, and they could be gone tomorrow. And I get that there's this consent judgment and that they'd have to come back, but it puts the applicant in a very difficult spot. I mean, talking about parking at Walgreens to me is not a great option. So I feel that when we're in this position, I feel like we should be making sure that the applicant comes and we are giving them the advice that they need, and they need to be thinking about the parking. So that's why I just want everyone to know that that's why I said no, but also I think it's odd the way we did this, that we can vote on it without really understanding the parking issue. I would have liked to have known how many parking spots they should be providing, what the deficiency is, how many they're relying on next door, and then making a better plan for what happens when those neighbors are no longer part of the agreement. But that was just what I wanted to let everybody know. And
Can I get a second chance?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to be with you, and I agree with you. I love any ball game, right? So I thought that a little bit of clarification would have been better from your side, Okay. But that's okay. I know that it's baseball. And that's how I want to end it.
Frank's comment, it's been there for 10 years.
Yeah, I hope, our lawyer will take care of this issue. So hopefully, city council can approve it with full information. But the parking for, my understanding, if it were something else other than a baseball game, then we would be more careful about it, so, but then, I agree with you.
Okay, Mr. Roush.
I agree with Ms. Parakis and her comment, especially the part about that there wasn't a guideline for the amount of parking required. I find it hard to believe that that doesn't exist someplace. But by the same token, the fact that there is an established a number of parking spaces next door, and that the city attorney has the ability and the understanding that the goal is to make sure that there is always replacement parking if that's not available. She does have a size to work with, so there is something to work with at least.
Understand?
No comment.
Comment? Okay, then we're adjourned. Did you have a comment?